Some empires are born only to vanish into the dust of history. Great cities crumble into forgotten ruins, and once legendary names fade from memory. But is Persia one of them? 5,000 years, a span of time long enough to change everything, yet short enough for a secret to never fully disappear. When Persepolis went up in flames over 2 millennia ago, the world believed it was the end. But did that fire truly burn away the soul of Persia? Or did it ignite an even deeper, more powerful spirit beneath the surface? Persia never died. It simply took on another name, Iran. And tonight we uncover its greatest secret, one this land has guarded for thousands of years. When we think of Persia, visions of grand palaces and noble warriors crossing endless deserts under a blazing sun often come to mind. But to truly understand Persia, we must let our imagination drift further back to a quiet morning nearly 5,000 years ago across the vast land we now call Iran. At that time, there were no palaces, no armies, just wide plains, winding rivers, and solemn mountains standing watch over secrets still untold. That land, seen from afar like a tapestry woven of mountains and dust, bore a name that time itself seemed eager to forget: Elam. A civilization as brilliant as Egypt or Mesopotamia, Elam thrived quietly along the shores of the Persian Gulf, silently laying the foundation for all the greatness yet to come. Unlike Egypt with its pyramids, or Babylon with its dazzling hanging gardens, Elam was modest and understated. Yet hidden in its soil was a treasure beyond gold or silver, the very first bricks of what would one day become Persian civilization. The Elamites knew how to build, how to write, and, more importantly, how to live in harmony with nature, silently but wisely. Their earliest symbols, carved into soft clay, still whisper messages that remain partially undecoded. But from what they left behind, we can sense something deeper than military power or material wealth, a longing to endure, and a burning desire to leave a mark on the never-ending current of time. As the Elamite civilization faded into shadow, it was not forgotten. Rather, it quietly passed the torch of history to a new people, the Medes. The Medes emerged during the twilight of a chaotic era, when nomadic tribes clashed over every stretch of the Iranian plateau. From this turmoil, they rose, not as conquerors, but as unifiers. They were the first to connect the scattered tribes, laying the groundwork for the mighty Persian Empire that would follow. The Medes were not only skilled warriors, they were thinkers too. They fought not just with strength, but with belief and unity. The Medes understood that true power didn't lie in sharpened swords or chariots of war, but in the ability to bring people together. It was this belief that inspired the first blueprint of an empire built not only on force, but on consensus and shared identity. Perhaps what made Persia truly great wasn't merely its territorial reach or its legendary military triumphs. It was the way it inherited and harmonized two essential legacies: the contemplative wisdom and quiet endurance of Elam, and the intelligence and cohesion of the Medes. From its very birth, Persia was a rare fusion of strength and insight, of conquest and peace-building. But what really gave Persia that enduring power? Was it simply the brilliance of its kings, Cyrus, Darius, or was it something deeper? Maybe Persia's secret was its constant gratitude to the past and its humility toward the future. It never discarded old values entirely, nor did it shy away from embracing new ones. That, more than anything, may be why it survived and flourished through the ages. One day, if you find yourself standing on the land that is now Iran, you might not immediately see the traces of Elam or the Medes, but Pause, close your eyes, listen. In the whisper of the mountain wind, the murmuring rivers, the soft-spoken stories of the locals, you may sense the breath of a civilization that never truly died, but quietly merged into new life, under a new name, a new form. And perhaps that is the true miracle. Persia is not just a name, nor merely an empire of the past. It is a living stream of wisdom, of ambition, of resilience, born from failure and of dreams passed from one generation to the next. So what truly made Persia what it was? Military might, imperial control, cultural brilliance? Or was it something simpler, the uncanny ability of a people to adapt, to rise from ashes, to quietly rebuild even when all seemed lost? The answer may lie in the hearts of those searching for their origins, in every Iranian today trying to understand the past to better see themselves in the present. And maybe, just maybe, Persia's greatest secret isn't buried in ruins or written in scrolls, but in that quiet, enduring life force that flows endlessly, like a river that never stops. As we trace the course of history, there are moments when certain individuals appear not merely as people, but as turning points, as signs of destiny. Cyrus the Great was one such figure. Unlike many kings who rose and fell into obscurity, Cyrus seemed born not just to rule an empire, but to shape an eternal idea, a belief larger than anything humanity had imagined. Cyrus emerged from the shadows of history, cloaked in mystery, part legend, part reality. Born into a chaotic world where power was defined by the sword and stained with blood, he seemed marked for greatness from the very beginning. The stories surrounding him are filled not only with heroism, but with rare human grace. He was not just a warrior or a conqueror. He was a builder, a leader who understood the very core of human nature. Across the Iranian plateau, tribes and fragmented kingdoms were locked in a relentless cycle of conflict and disorder. Cyrus, realizing that no true empire could survive on force alone, dared to do what few before him had imagined. He subdued enemies not only through strength, but through tolerance and compassion. He offered not just survival to the conquered, but something far more valuable: dignity. Perhaps the most iconic moment in Cyrus's life came when he entered Babylon. This city wasn't just a center of power and civilization, it was the very symbol of invincibility. Babylon, home of the legendary hanging gardens and towers that scraped the heavens, seemed untouchable. Yet Cyrus, instead of launching a brutal assault, chose a strategy that still stirs admiration today. He diverted the Euphrates River, opening a path into the city without needing to tear down its towering walls. And when he stepped into Babylon, he didn't enter as a ruthless conqueror, but as a liberator, bringing with him a fresh wind of hope and peace. Once inside, he did what few rulers in history dared to do. He didn't destroy temples, plunder wealth, or seek revenge. Instead, he honored the gods, culture, and beliefs of the Babylonians. He freed those held in slavery and issued what is now recognized as the first declaration of human rights in recorded history. That single act forever changed how humanity understood power and mercy. But Cyrus's true strength lay not in military triumphs. It ran deeper in his ability to see human worth beyond differences of culture or ethnicity. He ruled not by fear, but by respect. To Cyrus, a great empire wasn't one held together by force, but one unified by trust and voluntary allegiance. What Cyrus left behind was more than an empire stretching from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. He left behind a lesson in leadership, a legacy of kindness and understanding. His essence, though perhaps idealized through the centuries, still challenges us to ask, what is the greatest power a leader can possess? Could it be that empathy and wisdom, not domination, are the forces that make an empire endure? History, after all, is not always what we see on the surface. Deep down, Cyrus may have understood this. When he built his empire, he wasn't just expanding borders, he was crafting a belief, a vision that could outlive him. A belief in the strength of compassion. A belief that a great king does not rule by fear or violence, but by creating peace and prosperity for all, regardless of their origins or their gods. Perhaps it's because of this that when Cyrus died, he was mourned not just by Persians, but by thousands across distant lands, people he had once conquered, but also liberated. His tomb in Pasargadae still stands today, not grandiose, but humbly powerful. And those who stand before it often feel something deeper, quieter, a presence that time cannot erase. Maybe the true miracle of Cyrus isn't just in what he accomplished during his life, but in what he left behind. Not just an empire, but a story, a legend, a living ideal. Millennia later, Cyrus still lives on in the hearts of Iranians as a reminder that real strength in any age lies in understanding, unity, and kindness. Is that why Cyrus the Great never truly died? Perhaps he still lives quietly in every breath, in every heart that continues to believe in the values he once held dear. That question may forever echo like an eternal secret, a secret named Cyrus. If you ever walk across the vast marve-dashed plateau of Iran at sunset, you'll feel the unmistakable presence of Persepolis, the legendary city once known as the beating heart of the Persian Empire. Not everyone understands why, among countless ancient ruins scattered across the world, Persepolis continues to hold a mysterious allure, an invisible force that quietly draws people in to gaze, to reflect. Perhaps it's because Persepolis isn't just a city, it is a profound message, one that the Persian Empire left to humankind, a message that has silently endured for over 2 millennia and still echoes today. When Darius the Great laid the first stone of Persepolis around 518 BCE, he must have envisioned something far greater than towering palaces or intricate reliefs, the ones we still marvel at today. Darius intended Persepolis to be a symbol of unity, power, and the delicate balance among the many peoples of his vast empire. That's why the city was built not merely of stone and mortar, but of enduring values. Each slab of stone, each carved relief at Persepolis tells the story of an empire that was mighty, yet deeply humane. If Egypt reveals its mystery through pyramids and the Sphinx, and Greece dazzles with its elegant temples and columns, then Persepolis speaks with quiet dignity, majestic but never boastful. The reliefs do not glorify military conquest or overwhelming power. Instead, they depict scenes of diverse peoples bringing offerings, not under threat, but in peace and solemnity, pledging loyalty through mutual respect. At the Apadana, the grandest hall of Persepolis, you can witness carvings that portray an astonishing diversity of cultures from across the empire. Delegations arrive bearing gifts from distant Egypt, resplendent Babylon, and the rugged lands of Central Asia. These images are not just declarations of wealth and territorial reach, they are a profound statement on how Persians saw the world. They believed a truly great empire welcomed difference and wove cultures together through tolerance and reverence. But there is something even more extraordinary. If you take time to truly observe the seemingly straightforward reliefs, you'll find a subtle, yet powerful message woven into the stone. Each figure in these ceremonial processions, whether Persian or foreign, is depicted with equal dignity. There is no sign of bondage or subjugation. Instead, there's a quiet pride, a voluntary sense of belonging to something greater. It's as if the ancient artist, guided by kings like Darius or Xerxes, etched into stone a belief that real strength doesn't come from domination, but from mutual respect and harmony. Tragically, Persepolis was not spared by fate. In 330 BCE, the fire lit by Alexander the Great consumed nearly the entire city. And yet that fire failed to destroy the meaning Persepolis carried. In a twist of destiny, the destruction elevated it from a physical place to an eternal symbol of resilience and an unyielding spirit. Today, when you stand before its towering columns or ascend its mighty stairways, you can still feel its undiminished majesty, as though the city never truly disappeared. Perhaps that's why Persepolis remains so present in contemporary Iranian culture. It's not just a tourist destination, it is a living reminder that the past walks beside us, silently teaching us lessons far greater than glory or power. You'll find traces of Persepolis everywhere, in modern Iranian life, in books, in paintings, in films, and even in subtle elements of architecture. Persepolis did not die, it has been quietly reborn, persisting with renewed strength, continuing to carry a message. That a nation's true power lies not in how many lands it conquers, or how many enemies it defeats, but in its ability to unify, to coexist, and to honor cultural diversity. In the end, perhaps Persepolis was never just a city. It is a state of mind, a reminder of the immortality of beauty and human dignity. And with every sunset that washes over its weathered stones, with every whisper of wind that drifts through its ancient pillars, we are left wondering, have we truly listened to what Persepolis is trying to say? Do we have the courage to build a world like the one they once dreamed of? Maybe that is what Persepolis, despite the rise and fall of centuries, still longs to tell us. It stands there still, silent, proud, and unbroken. And each time we look back, we realize that Persepolis never truly vanished. It still lives, not in stone, but in the hearts and minds of those who pause to reflect on the true meaning of a legendary city. Standing among the weathered ruins of Persepolis, surrounded by towering stone columns faded by time, one can't help but wonder what truly allowed the Persian Empire, stretching from distant Egypt to the remote frontiers of India, to maintain such remarkable stability and flourish for so long. It wasn't by chance that Persia became the blueprint for many future civilizations. From Rome to the Ottomans, empires quietly borrowed from the way the Persians ruled. But where did the secret lie? Was it in overwhelming military power, or was there something deeper, something more refined? To understand this, we must return to the golden age of Darius the Great, a ruler remembered not only for his brilliant military victories, but more importantly, for establishing what could be considered the world's first truly stable and far-reaching system of governance. Darius understood that an empire could not survive on fleeting victories or temporary declarations of might. It needed solid foundations, a structure intelligent enough to manage and connect countless peoples from vastly different backgrounds under a single, unified vision. Darius divided his vast empire into regions called satrapies, each governed by a satrap, the king's direct representative. But these satraps were more than administrators, they were cultural liaisons. They helped local populations feel not conquered, but embraced as part of a greater, wealthier, more secure whole. Perhaps more than any other civilization of the time, the Persians understood that true power lies in making people feel they belong to something greater than themselves. But the Persian genius didn't stop at territorial administration. The true brilliance lay in how they constructed the foundations of justice and authority. In Persia, power wasn't just the domain of swords or vast armies, it lived in the law. A clear, consistent, and fair legal system governed all, including the king himself. Historical accounts are filled with stories of Persian rulers who held themselves accountable to the law, an extraordinary rarity in the ancient world. These kings knew that for the people to trust the system, those at the top had to lead by example. This created a deep sense of safety and trust across the empire. No matter where you lived or what your heritage was, you could expect fairness, and your voice could be heard. It's no surprise, then, that Persia built one of the most advanced communication networks the world had ever seen, the Royal Road, over 2,500 kilometers long. Along this road, royal couriers could deliver messages from the capital at Persepolis to distant provinces in less than a week. This was more than a technical marvel. It was a declaration of how Persia governed. Power and stability depended not just on control, but on listening, on reaching even the most distant corners of the empire with understanding and clarity. Imagine being a simple citizen at the edge of the empire, and within days of raising your voice, your concerns could be heard in the imperial capital. That, seemingly so small, was in fact the keystone of Persia's enduring unity and order. Perhaps the most powerful image of Persian governance lies in how they treated conquered peoples. Unlike many empires that ruled through fear and forced cultural assimilation, the Persians chose tolerance and respect. Conquered peoples were allowed to keep their faiths, their customs, even their local systems of governance, as long as they remained loyal and contributed to the empire's greater good. This not only avoided rebellion, it transformed each newly acquired region into a stronger link in the vast chain they were building. In the end, what made Persia great wasn't simply its conquests, it was the art of rule, masterfully balanced between strength and compassion. That's how an empire so massive it should have collapsed under its own weight remained an astonishingly unified and resilient force. Today, as we reflect on Persia's mastery of governance, we're left to ask, could the way they ruled the ancient world still hold lessons for our own? Lessons not just about power and control, but about justice, mercy, and the creation of a world where everyone feels seen, heard, and respected. Perhaps this is what Persia, from deep in the past, still quietly whispers to us. A message that never grows old, an eternal secret of power. A power that never shouts but endures, silent, profound, and strong enough to live forever in the flowing current of human history. History often remembers empires through their greatest victories, but sometimes it is their defeats that reveal the deepest truths about a nation's soul. For Persia, perhaps no moment captures this better than the Battle of Marathon, a battle that came to symbolize the unfinished dreams of the greatest empire of the ancient world. On a September morning in 490 BCE on the plains of Marathon near Athens, the Persian warriors, accustomed to victory as a matter of routine, faced something they had never expected. It was the fierce, surprising strength of the small, determined Greek fighters. What Persia believed would be a swift and effortless conquest turned instead into a harsh lesson, a moment that forced them to reconsider how they viewed the world. Marathon ended in a shocking defeat for the Persians, but what truly mattered was what came after. History often celebrates Marathon as a triumph for the Greeks, yet few look closely at what happened on the other side, among those who had just tasted a rare and bitter loss. For Persia, this was more than a military setback. It was the first time the mighty empire came face to face with its own limits. The Persians did not crumble in the face of defeat. Instead, they learned to pause, to reflect, and to prepare more carefully for the challenges ahead. Darius the Great, the mind behind the campaign, recognized that Marathon was not the end, but a necessary reminder. Unchecked power and ambition without balance or humility can lead even the strongest empires to the edge of ruin. Yet the Persian dream did not die with one defeat. It was bigger than that, stronger than that, and this resilience became evident just 10 years later at the Battle of Salamis. This time, Xerxes, son of Darius, led a colossal army and naval force, determined to avenge his father's loss. But once again, history answered with brutal honesty. Salamis was a reminder that overconfidence can be the most dangerous enemy of all. At Salamis, Persia's vast fleet was lured into a clever geographic trap by the Greeks and suffered a devastating naval defeat. It was the second major blow delivered at the very moment Persia appeared invincible. And yet, remarkably, these defeats did not bring about the empire's collapse. On the contrary, they became part of a larger story of resilience, a testament to a civilization accustomed to victory but never broken by defeat. In the aftermath of Salamis, the Persians became more measured. They did not abandon their imperial ambitions, but they learned to temper them with wisdom and realism. Their strength no longer relied solely on conquest. It came to include patience, humility, and an extraordinary ability to adapt in the face of adversity. What the Persians learned from Marathon and Salamis may well be the most valuable lesson history can offer. True power does not come from never failing. It comes from how we respond to failure. Persia came to see defeat not as an end, but as a teacher, a harsh, honest companion that forced them to look inward and grow stronger. That is why even after the painful defeats in Greece, the Persian Empire remained standing for centuries. It retained its wealth, its stability, and its cultural influence long after others might have collapsed. Defeat, when met with humility and wisdom, is never a final chapter, but the beginning of a deeper kind of strength. The Persians, perhaps more than any ancient empire, came to understand this truth. Their dream of a unified realm stretching from Asia to Europe may never have been fully realized, but the lessons of Marathon and Salamis helped them endure longer, adapt better, and grow wiser than any conqueror who measured greatness by victories alone. Today, as we look back at those legendary battles, the most meaningful insight may not be about winning or losing. It is that Persia showed the world how to rise after a fall, how to believe even when dreams go unfulfilled. Perhaps the real Persian dream was never about absolute domination, but about the enduring will to rise again, to keep learning, to grow stronger with each setback. And if we listen closely, perhaps we can still hear it, somewhere on the plains of Marathon or across the waves at Salamis. A faint whisper. An unfinished dream is never truly a failure. As long as we rise and keep moving forward, that dream lives on, breathing quietly in the ever-flowing winds of history. When people speak of Alexander the Great, the image that often comes to mind is that of a young, ambitious warrior, a brilliant commander who reshaped the ancient world in just over a decade. But from Persia's point of view, Alexander was more than a conqueror. He was destiny at once tragic and profound, forcing one of the greatest empires in human history to look inward and confront itself. The moment Persia fell to Alexander at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE became etched into the chronicles of history as a symbol of inevitable change. On that vast battlefield, the Persian army under King Darius III, once considered the most fearsome force on earth, came face to face with a startling realization: they were no longer invincible. Against all odds, Alexander and his comparatively modest army shattered the illusion of Persian supremacy and delivered a crushing blow to a world order long held in place. When Alexander entered Persepolis, the heart and symbol of Persian imperial power, it was a moment suspended in time. There were no celebratory executions, no mass slaughter. Yet a mysterious fire was lit, consuming the most magnificent city of the ancient world in red flame. Historians still debate whether the fire was an act of revenge, carelessness, or a symbolic gesture by Alexander himself, marking the end of an era and the birth of something new. But did Persia truly collapse before Alexander? When the flames died down, what remained amid the ashes? The truth is, while Alexander may have conquered the Persian Empire on the battlefield, he never succeeded in destroying its cultural soul. In fact, quite the opposite. He became an unlikely guardian and even a vessel for that legacy. Alexander did not treat Persian culture as something to be erased. He recognized its profound value. He dressed in Persian garments, embraced Persian court rituals, and encouraged intermarriage between his Greek soldiers and local women. These actions, perhaps more than his military triumphs, laid the groundwork for the survival and even flourishing of Persian culture after the fall of its political empire. And so a powerful paradox emerged. Alexander dismantled the political structure of Persia, yet he also ensured its spirit would endure. The territories he conquered, from Egypt and Syria to India, absorbed Persian influences more deeply than ever before. Persian art, architecture, philosophy, administrative systems, even its language, quietly spread across Alexander's new Hellenistic world, becoming an inseparable part of it. Perhaps Alexander himself came to understand this truth, that the destruction of an empire does not lie in sacking a capital or dethroning a king. A true empire, a true civilization, lives deeper, beyond walls, beyond armies. It lives in the language people speak, in the stories they pass down to their children, and in how they make sense of the world around them. Persia did not die when Alexander stepped into Persepolis. On the contrary, that moment compelled Persia to transform, to adapt, and to emerge stronger in a new and more profound way. After Alexander, the empire as a political entity may have ceased to exist, but its spirit, culture, and ideas never stopped evolving. They continued to flow through the Hellenistic cities, through architectural marvels from Egypt to India, and through the hearts of countless people who lived and died under new dynasties, carrying Alexander's legacy forward. Today, as we stand before the ancient ruins of Persepolis or recognize Persian influences still visible in modern Iranian culture, we begin to understand, no matter how powerful Alexander was, he could not destroy the true soul of Persia. At most, he reshaped it, helped it evolve, helped it survive through transformation. It endured deeper, stronger, and more subtly, embedded within the very world Alexander thought he had conquered. And perhaps that is the most extraordinary truth about history itself, that a truly great civilization never dies. It simply returns in a new form, reborn stronger and wiser, echoing forever through the breath of humanity. Persia, tested by fire and fate through Alexander's conquest, remains one of the clearest and most enduring testaments to that eternal miracle. As the sun sets over the crumbling ruins of Persepolis, one question echoes quietly in the hearts of those who stand before the remnants of what was once the greatest empire of the ancient world. How can a civilization, conquered, burned, and defeated time and again, still find a way to rise, to rebuild itself from the ashes, with renewed strength? The answer, perhaps, lies in the unexpected emergence of the Parthian Empire, a new light that flickered into existence after what seemed like the darkest of nights. Parthia, a small and overlooked land in its earliest days, rose from the ruins of the empire left behind by Alexander the Great. Initially dismissed as insignificant, these nomadic horsemen from the rugged Iranian plateau lived in the shadows of larger empires. But it was their simplicity, their adaptability, and their resilience that enabled them to slowly craft a powerful state, one that would ultimately inherit the Persian legacy and revive the spirit of a civilization that many had believed lost. The Parthians understood that they could not match the military might of the Hellenistic Seleucids or the rising powers of the West through brute strength alone. Instead, they relied on agility and tactical brilliance, especially their mastery of horseback warfare. The Parthian cavalry archers and their legendary Parthian shot, firing arrows while retreating at full gallop, became the stuff of military legend. But the real secret of their endurance went deeper than strategy. It lay in their subtle, deliberate revival of Persian identity, culture, and pride. When they took power, the Parthians did not erase what Alexander had left behind, nor did they turn their backs entirely on the Hellenistic influences of the preceding era. Instead, they did something far more profound. They reshaped Persian identity into a new form, stronger, more flexible, and deeply rooted in tradition. Parthian kings once again wore Persian garments, reinstated ancient royal rituals, and restored the spiritual values that had once empowered Persia under Cyrus and Darius. This was not merely a political act, it was a deeply symbolic gesture to the people. Persia had never died, it had simply been waiting for the right moment to be reborn. The Parthians revived the ancient Persian language, gave voice again to myths and epic poems long forgotten, and restored sacred cultural traditions that had been overshadowed by Greek influence. Zoroastrian ceremonies, once quietly practiced, flourished once more, woven back into the spiritual fabric of daily life. Through all of this, a powerful truth began to take shape. That Persia, no matter how many times it fell, could always find its soul again. But why is Persia so uniquely able to rise from defeat, to reclaim its essence no matter the hardship? Perhaps the secret lies in how the Persians saw the world. Ancient Persians understood that failure was never the end. It was a transition, a moment of reflection, a space to recalibrate before taking the next bold step forward. Every fall was seen as an opportunity to grow wiser, stronger, and more prepared for the next chapter. Parthia, then, was not simply a successor to Persian political and territorial control, it was a symbol of that miraculous power of renewal. The Parthian revival proved that cultural identity, spiritual belief, and intellectual values are more enduring than any military victory or imperial authority. These intangible foundations, passed quietly from generation to generation, are what make a civilization eternal. Even today, as we stand among the ancient ruins of Parthian cities, or gaze upon the scattered remnants of their empire across the Iranian plateau, we can still sense the vitality that never truly faded. Persia, though subdued and conquered many times, never surrendered its belief in the future. It continued patiently, faithfully, to nurture a deep and quiet conviction that it would rise again, rewrite its story, and reclaim its voice. Perhaps this is what made Persia truly great, not that it never failed, but that it always found the strength to rise again. Parthia is living proof of this. And maybe, in our own moments of hardship, when we wonder if we can overcome our most difficult trials, we can look to Persia, to the Parthian revival, and remember, true greatness lies not in avoiding failure, but in the strength to rise stronger every time we fall. And perhaps that is why, though Persia has collapsed many times throughout history, it has never truly died. It still lives, quietly but powerfully, waiting for the moment when it will rise once again from the ashes. When the shadows of history seem to engulf the Iranian plateau following the decline of Parthia, and when it appeared Persia would never again reclaim its former glory, a new flame suddenly burst forth, brighter and more powerful than ever before. That flame was the Sassanid Empire, remembered today as the final golden chapter of ancient Persia, just before the world it once knew was forever transformed by the rise of Islam. The return of Persia under the Sassanids was not merely a political or military resurgence, it was a full-scale cultural and civilizational renaissance. Under the Sassanid court, art, science, and philosophy flourished in ways unmatched by any previous era. Grand libraries and learning centers were established, vibrant philosophical debates echoed through bustling cities, and gifted artists crafted exquisite masterpieces. It was a dazzling portrait of a society that had matured both spiritually and intellectually. The Sassanid kings, most notably Shapur and Khosrau Anushirvan, were visionary patrons of knowledge and creativity. They welcomed scholars, scientists, and artists from across the known world to the imperial capital of Ctesiphon, transforming it into a center of innovation and enlightenment. Key works were translated from Greek, Sanskrit, and Latin into Middle Persian, laying the intellectual groundwork for what would later become the Islamic Golden Age. Sassanid culture, with its breathtaking bas-reliefs, intricate jewelry, and magnificent palatial architecture, was more than a display of power. It was a bold reaffirmation of Persian identity in a world of constant change. Yet the Sassanid Empire was not defined by cultural brilliance alone. It also waged relentless wars against its most formidable rival, the Roman and later Byzantine Empire. These clashes, which spanned over 4 centuries, formed a solemn chorus of conflict and peace, strength and vulnerability, understanding and hostility. In epic battles such as Kare, Edessa, and the legendary confrontation at Nineveh, Persia demonstrated not only its military might but also an unwavering resilience in the face of a rival equally mighty and sophisticated. What was perhaps most remarkable about this relationship was not just the endless war, but the fleeting moments of peace and mutual respect that emerged between these two great civilizations. In these intervals, they exchanged goods, ideas, and cultural influence, from architecture and fashion to philosophy and religion. Persia and Rome, in a deeper sense, were not just eternal foes, they were reluctant partners in shaping the shared heritage of the world we live in today. But as always, history chose its own path. Though mighty and radiant, the Sassanid Empire could not escape the currents of fate. In the early 7th century, a new and unprecedented force emerged from the Arabian Peninsula: Islam. Driven by fierce conviction and an unstoppable will to expand, Arab forces swiftly redrew the map of the ancient world. In 651, the Sassanid Empire, after centuries of holding off powerful enemies, finally fell to the Islamic armies, marking the end of a Persian imperial era that had lasted over a millennium. Yet was that truly the end of Persia? The most profound legacy of the Sassanid Empire may not lie in its fall, but in what it passed on to the Islamic world that succeeded it. While the Arabs triumphed militarily, they became inheritors of Persian culture and knowledge. The scientific, philosophical, and literary achievements of ancient Persia, were translated into Arabic and became the bedrock of the Islamic Golden Age. Though the Sassanid Empire ceased to exist, Persia, in a remarkable twist of fate, lived on, infused into the very fabric of the new historical order. And perhaps this is the most enduring truth the Sassanids left behind, that Persia is not bound by geography or time. It is an idea, a living, evolving spirit that survives through adaptation, reinvention, and endurance. Today, when we stand before the final traces of the Sassanid world, we can still feel that extraordinary vitality of a civilization that has endured not through military might, but through its power to inspire, transform, and resurrect itself again and again in the hearts of future generations. So perhaps the greatest lesson of the Sassanids is not simply one of past glory, but of an enduring faith in the immortality of spiritual values. A truly great civilization, after all, will always find a way to live on in the minds and memories of those who follow, regardless of the changing tides of history and time. There are moments in history when a sweeping wave crashes through, forever transforming everything people once knew and cherished. For Persia, that wave was the Islamic conquest, a turning point so immense that many still wonder. After all the profound changes, was Persia still truly itself? Or had it become merely a small part of a vast and entirely new world? In the 7th century CE, the ancient Persian world was irrevocably altered under the hooves of Islamic warriors from the Arabian Peninsula. When Muslim forces entered Ctesiphon in 637, the dazzling capital of the Sassanid Empire, many believed it was the final chapter of a once mighty civilization that had stretched from the Mediterranean to India. But history often holds its greatest surprises in its darkest hours. For Persia, military defeat was not the end. On the contrary, it was the beginning of a new journey, profound, symbolic, and transformative. The most visible change brought by the Islamic conquest was, of course, the arrival of a new faith, Islam. And yet, what is most remarkable is how the Persians embraced this new religion. They did not adopt it passively or begrudgingly. Rather, they saw in its spiritual messages something deeply familiar, something that resonated with their own ancient values. Islam did not erase Persian culture. It opened the door for its rebirth in a new, distinct form. Under the banner of Islam, Persia not only adapted, it became one of the most vital forces shaping the very identity of the new Islamic civilization. The Persians brought with them their intellect, their language, their art, and their philosophy, weaving them seamlessly into the Islamic world and igniting a spiritual and intellectual renaissance like never before. Baghdad, the new capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, was built near the ruins of Ctesiphon. This was no coincidence. The Abbasids chose this land not only for its geography, but because they recognized that it was here, in the shadow of Persian legacy, that a new empire could reach the cultural and intellectual heights it aspired to. Persian scholars, with their extraordinary talents in translation and innovation, brought the great works of Greece, India, and ancient Persia into the heart of Baghdad's intellectual life. They transformed it into the greatest scholarly hub of the medieval world, a meeting place for humanity's deepest ideas. Names like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Al-Khwarizmi, Omar Khayyam, and Rumi are not merely figures of Islamic history, they are vivid proof that Persia never truly disappeared. Instead, it quietly reshaped the new world in its own image. The Persian language, though seemingly eclipsed by Arabic at first, soon re-emerged as a major literary, scientific, and artistic language across the Islamic world. Persian poetry, subtle, profound, and emotionally rich, spread far beyond Iran. The verses of Rumi, Hafez, and Ferdowsi not only endured but created a new cultural identity within the Islamic world. And so even if Persia no longer existed as an independent empire, its soul lived on, stronger, clearer, and more inspiring than ever before. So what truly happened when Persia embraced Islam? Did it surrender its identity to become part of something larger? Or did it, in fact, transform that very world, infusing it with deeper meaning, greater elegance, and a spiritual heritage uniquely its own? The answer lies not in battlefield victories or defeats, but in Persia's timeless ability to survive its greatest trials. Persia learned to change without ever losing its essence. It mastered the art of integration without erasure. And above all, it understood that to endure eternally, a civilization must become part of something greater, a continuous human story that transcends generations. And today, when we stand beneath the turquoise domes of Isfahan, or quietly read the poetry of Rumi, we understand. Persia never died. It simply returned, reborn in a new form, still profound, still powerful, and still capable of shaping the world around it. Perhaps this is Persia's greatest secret, the quiet power to live on forever, not through conquest, but through cultural transformation, not by resisting change, but by mastering it. Persia became an eternal inspiration, proof that a civilization's true strength lies in its ability to adapt, to inspire, and to be reborn with each new turn in the river of history. When people look back on the Islamic Golden Age, a radiant era stretching from the 8th to the 13th century, they often envision a flourishing Baghdad, bathed in the light of knowledge, art, and innovation. But what many do not immediately realize is that the brightest flame of that age was kindled by the deep, enduring fire of Persian civilization, a fire that had never truly gone out, despite the countless upheavals of history. After the Abbasid Caliphate established its authority and moved the capital from Damascus to Baghdad in the mid-8th century, they didn't just select a strategically favorable location. They chose the very heartland of Persia, just beyond the ruins of Ctesiphon, because they understood something vital. To build an empire of lasting greatness, they needed more than military might and political power. They needed Persia with all its wisdom, creativity, and extraordinary resilience, which had carried it through some of history's harshest trials. The Abbasids didn't merely inherit Persia, they absorbed it, allowing Persian culture and intellect to become inseparable from the fabric of the new Islamic identity. From courtly life to daily culture, from literature to philosophy, architecture to fine arts, the Persian imprint was everywhere. At times it felt as though the Abbasid Empire was not just an Islamic caliphate, but a new, refined, and enlightened iteration of the Persian empires that came before it. Persian literature, especially poetry, emerged as one of the most eloquent, refined, and powerful expressions of the era. In the palaces and bustling streets of Baghdad, one would hear not only Arabic, but also Persian, a language filled with rhythm, melody, and poetic elegance. Poets like Ferdowsi, who penned the epic Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, did more than preserve Persian history. They resurrected the very soul of Persian culture in verse. Shahnameh was not just a literary masterpiece, it was a declaration of cultural immortality, a reminder that though Persia may have been conquered, its identity was never lost. But Persian influence extended far beyond the arts. It thrived in philosophy, science, and medicine. Avicenna, Ibn Sina, one of the greatest minds of the medieval world, was Persian, and he revolutionized human understanding of medicine and metaphysics. His canon of medicine became a foundational text in both the Islamic world and medieval Europe, shaping the Renaissance centuries later. Mathematicians like Al-Khwarizmi, a Persian scholar, laid the groundwork for algebra, and from his name, the modern term algorithm is derived. In astronomy, Persian scholars constructed renowned observatories such as the one at Marageh, where the stars were mapped with astonishing precision, helping humanity better understand its place in the cosmos. How then did Persia achieve so much so soon after such profound conquest? The answer lies in its extraordinary ability to adapt, transforming adversity into fuel for creativity and growth. For Persians, every loss became a chance for renewal, every fall an opportunity to reclaim and reimagine the essence of who they were. Through this resilience, Persia's influence expanded not just within the Islamic world, but helped define it. Persian language, literature, and thought became cornerstones of Islamic civilization, infusing it with depth, elegance, and philosophical richness. Islam, once solely a religion, evolved into a global cultural force, and Persia played an irreplaceable role in that transformation. Today, when we stand before the breathtaking mosques from Spain to India, or when we quietly turn the pages of ancient manuscripts, we find Persia's legacy quietly present. It lives on in the grand domes of Isfahan, in the verses of Rumi that still resonate around the world, and in the way we think about knowledge, spirit, and human potential. Perhaps the most wondrous gift Persia gave to the Islamic world was not just its vast cultural treasure, but its vision of strength through unity, beauty in diversity, and harmony through exchange. Persia taught the world that a truly great civilization does not stand apart. It joins, it contributes, it enriches everything it touches. And so perhaps this is why Persia never truly died. It continues like a flame that never fades, warming and illuminating the civilizations that followed. It lives on in the endless river of human history, a silent but enduring guide reminding us of the power of rebirth, transformation, and timeless inspiration. When all things fade with time, when the grandest palaces crumble and the mightiest empires fall, what remains to tell the story of a civilization? Perhaps the answer lies in poetry. And if you listen closely, through the whispering wind drifting over the ancient ruins of the Iranian plateau, you might still hear the gentle yet powerful verses of Persia, eternal murmurs that have never lost their vitality, no matter how many storms history has brought. For Persians, poetry has never been just words and rhythm. It is breath, it is soul, it is their fiercest form of life. In poetry, Persians have always found a way to express what cannot be spoken in ordinary language. The deepest truths, the most sacred griefs, the most transcendent joys. Through the voices of great poets like Ferdowsi, Rumi, and Omar Khayyam, Persian poetry became something immortal, an unbroken flame crossing the boundaries of time and space, forever alive in the human spirit. Ferdowsi, the first name that must be spoken when Persian poetry is mentioned, dedicated nearly 30 years of his life to writing the epic Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, a monumental work that reimagined the mythic and heroic past of his people. Ferdowsi did not merely compose poetry, he rewrote the very soul of Persia. In his verses we find pride, quiet anguish, and the enduring strength of a nation that had weathered countless upheavals. When Ferdowsi died, he left behind not just a literary masterpiece, but an eternal declaration that no matter how many trials a nation endures, it cannot lose its identity, so long as it remembers the stories of its ancestors, so long as its poetry still sings. But if Ferdowsi preserved the soul and history of Persia, Then Rumi, perhaps the greatest poet of the Islamic world, opened a doorway into a deeper realm, a boundless world, where poetry became the path to the meaning of existence itself. Rumi did not write about heroic deeds. He wrote of love, of longing, of spiritual union between humanity and the divine. In Rumi's poetry, Persia became infinite, no longer confined by any one culture or moment in time. His verses are gentle and fierce at once, speaking directly to the heart of every reader, in every era, in every corner of the world. That is why Rumi's poetry never ages, never dims. It endures as long as the eternal yearnings of the human soul. And then there is Omar Khayyam, the poet, mathematician, astronomer, an enigmatic, multi-dimensional spirit best known for his Rubaiyat, a collection of four-line quatrains as sharp as blades and as reflective as still water. Khayyam viewed life through the eyes of a realist and the heart of a philosopher. He understood that existence was fleeting, and it was precisely this impermanence that made life so precious. His verses, brief but resonant, linger in the reader's mind, reminding us to savor the smallest moments, for in those moments lie the essence of all we can ever truly hold on to in this brief life. Why, then, has Persian poetry endured for thousands of years? Perhaps because for Persians, poetry is not a luxury. It is a way of life, a way of thinking and feeling. Poetry is the sacred space where the Persian soul finds its deepest voice. Through verse, Persians see themselves, their culture, and their immortality, even in the face of loss and change. And if today, in this fast-moving, ever-changing world, you pause for a moment to open the pages of ancient Persian poetry, you may feel something miraculous. Words written centuries, even millennia ago, will speak to you as if they were composed just for this moment, for you, now. That is the eternal power of Persian poetry. It never fades, it never grows old, it speaks always of the most timeless truths in the human heart. Perhaps that is why, no matter how many times Persia has fallen throughout history, its soul has never died. It lives on, quietly, resiliently, within its poetry. And each time those verses are read aloud, it is not only the voices of Ferdowsi, Rumi, or Omar Khayyam we hear. It is the whisper of Persia itself, telling a story that has no ending, a story still being written in the heart of every reader who listens. One day, should you find yourself wandering the long, echoing corridors of a museum, pausing before a radiant blue-glazed ceramic jar glowing softly under dim light, or gazing upward at the intricate dome of an ancient palace, you may come to understand a profound truth. Behind every masterpiece, every structure, every invention lies a quiet story of gifted hands and brilliant minds from the legendary land of Persia. Persia, with a history spanning thousands of years, was not merely the backdrop for the rise and fall of mighty empires. It was the cradle of inventions and ideas that transformed the course of human civilization. For centuries, Persians were not content simply to survive the tides of history. They created continuously and tirelessly, leaving behind a legacy of civilization that still breathes. You may not have known that the world's first windmills didn't appear in Europe, but in the sun-drenched, wind-swept highlands of Iran, long before the Dutch raised theirs. Ancient Persian engineers harnessed the forces of nature to grind grain, draw water, and irrigate arid fields. These windmills, both simple and efficient, were more than technical marvels. They stood as symbols of boundless ingenuity and the extraordinary perseverance of a people in harmony with their harsh surroundings. Then there was the Qanat, an underground irrigation system that made life possible in Persia's driest deserts. More than an engineering feat, the Qanat embodied a philosophy of life, that no matter how unforgiving the land, the human spirit, armed with intelligence and resolve, could adapt, endure, and flourish. But Persian creativity did not stop with practical inventions. It gave rise to an artistic language, subtle, expressive, and deeply meaningful, that continues to leave the world in awe. Persian ceramics, especially during the Islamic era, became one of humanity's finest artistic legacies. Vessels adorned with deep cobalt blues and shimmering jade glazes were not just beautiful, they whispered stories of love, life, and the cosmos. In each delicate motif, Persian artisans wove soul and vision into everyday objects, elevating them into timeless expressions of their worldview. Stand beneath the dome of a Persian mosque, and you will feel a wonder that defies description. Persian architecture, with its majestic domes and flawless geometric patterns, reveals a unique fusion of mathematics, aesthetics, and spirit. Structures like the Imam Mosque in Isfahan or the Golestan Palace in Tehran are not mere buildings. They are poems in brick and stone, composed by a civilization seeking perfect balance between beauty, intellect, and transcendence. Perhaps the most refined expression of Persian creativity is found in its calligraphy. For Persians, writing was never merely a tool, it was an art form, the highest embodiment of beauty and wisdom. Each flowing line of Persian script curves like a whispered story, each graceful stroke like the rhythm of thought and feeling. Calligraphy in Persia was not simply about beautiful letters, it was about giving form to the soul, merging visual art with a deep philosophy of life. So why have Persian inventions and art left such a lasting imprint on the world? Perhaps it is because Persians never created solely to display power or dominance. They created as a way of communicating with the world, as a way to leave behind something enduring, a testament to their intellect, resilience, and timeless pursuit of beauty and meaning. What Persians left us was never just functional or ornamental. Their inventions, their artworks, their ideas are mirrors into who they were and how they understood their place in the universe. That is why, even after millennia of upheaval and transformation, Persian creations are still admired, still studied, and still alive. And today, when we stand before these masterpieces, we see more than beauty or craftsmanship. We see the soul of a civilization, a people who learned how to live forever through their creative spirit. Perhaps that is the greatest, most beautiful invention Persia ever gave the world, the ability to transform even the fragile impermanence of human existence into something eternal, worthy of wonder and filled with life. And every time we behold a Persian artifact or encounter a timeless design or invention with its unmistakable touch, we are gently invited to ask, can anything in this world truly last forever? The answer perhaps lies in the quiet brilliance Persia has left behind, for us to cherish and for the world to continue rediscovering generation after generation. There is something both strange and beautiful in human history. At times, the greatest civilizations are seen most clearly through the eyes of outsiders. Persia is no exception. To the Western world, Persia has long appeared as a place both mysterious and alluring, a world seemingly distant, yet hauntingly familiar. And it is precisely this gaze, shaped by wonder and imagination, that has kept Persia alive in the heart of European culture, art, and thought for centuries. When Herodotus, the Greek historian, traveled to Persia in the 5th century BCE, he did more than record history and customs. He brought back stories, rich and exotic, of a vast, powerful, and sophisticated empire. Though sometimes embellished or mythologized, his accounts laid the foundation for the Western imagination of Persia, a realm where power and elegance walked hand in hand, where wisdom met strength in a delicate balance. But that was only the beginning. Across the centuries, Persia held a unique and enduring place in the Western mind. It is no coincidence that Alexander the Great, upon conquering Persia, became so captivated by its culture that he adopted many of its customs, rituals, and even administrative principles. This fascination planted the earliest seeds of East-West cultural exchange, with Persia at the center, both as teacher and partner. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Persia emerged in Europe's imagination as a land of incomparable wealth and enchantment. In literature, in painting, in folklore, Persia stood for opulence, mystery, and refinement. Persian carpets, brought to Europe not just as luxury decor but as symbols of nobility and taste, became icons of aristocratic identity. Persian garden design, with its harmony of nature and architecture, deeply influenced the noble estates of Europe, from Versailles to the villas of Italy and Spain. And one cannot ignore the profound impact of Persian literature and philosophy on European thought. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the works of Rumi, Hafez, and Omar Khayyam, once translated into European languages, sent waves of fascination through the continent. Rumi's poetry offered a spiritual lens unlike any Europe had known, one that spoke of divine love, the search for meaning, and the unity of all beings. Omar Khayyam's Rubaiyat, with its blend of worldly wisdom and existential reflection, became an essential text in European literary circles, influencing thinkers and writers such as Voltaire, Goethe, and Edward Fitzgerald. And then there was music. Western symphonies, operas, and ballets drew deep inspiration from the spirit of Persia. Puccini's Turandot with its exotic overtones, or Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade, infused with oriental allure, carry within them whispers of Persia's captivating soul, a soul that inspired, seduced, and lingered in the imagination of generations. Why, then, has Persia left such a profound and lasting imprint on the Western world, even though it never ruled or conquered the West? The answer may lie in the fact that Persia was never merely a place nor just a historical empire. It has always been a symbol of beauty, intellect, refinement, and the timeless human values that every civilization dreams of attaining. To the Western eye, Persia became a realm both foreign and familiar, a mirror reflecting humanity's highest aspirations. And that is why, through all the turmoil of history, Persia never truly vanished from the European imagination. It remained quietly as part of the Western vision of the world. Today, as we look back at the deep influence Persia has had on Western culture, what we discover is not merely the power of a past civilization, but the power of Persia to inspire. It became a dream, a beautiful, enduring dream that generations have longed to touch. And perhaps this is Persia's greatest magic, not in how rich it once was or how mighty its kings, but in how it continues to exist, not just in ruins or relics, but in the deepest dreams and highest ideals of humanity. Each time we think of Persia, we do not merely recall an ancient empire, we glimpse the very best of ourselves, what we love, what we seek, and what we strive to become. There is something strange and deeply mysterious in human history, how distant civilizations, seemingly worlds apart, can touch one another so profoundly. And perhaps nowhere illustrates this truth more clearly than the quiet yet powerful relationship between Persia and the West. For centuries, the West has looked toward Persia with a gaze filled with both admiration and curiosity. To the ancient Greeks, Persia was both a formidable adversary in war and a dazzling symbol of wealth, opulence, and Eastern mystery. Since the time of Herodotus, known as the father of Western history, Persia has captured the European imagination. His tales of the Persian Empire painted a world both strange and magnetic, though often laced with myth and misunderstanding. To the Western mind, Persia was always both near and far, both real and mythical, a land forever shrouded in layers of enchantment yet to be fully unraveled. But the truly remarkable story lies in how Persia quietly and over many centuries left an indelible mark on Western culture and imagination. When Alexander the Great conquered Persia, it was he and his Greek soldiers who, in turn, became captivated by Persian culture. They brought back not just gold and treasures, but ideas, philosophy, art, and ways of life. Lavish banquets in the Persian style, opulent attire, and even new concepts of governance and power gradually infiltrated Hellenistic society, then Rome, and eventually all of Europe. In the medieval period, as Europe struggled through centuries of intellectual darkness, it was Persian knowledge, scientific, mathematical, and philosophical, that helped light the way toward the Renaissance. The works of Persian thinkers like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Al-Khwarizmi, and countless astronomers were translated into Latin and taught in Europe's earliest universities. Persia was no longer an unknown realm. It had become a beacon of wisdom, a custodian of knowledge that Europe desperately sought. During the Renaissance, Persian influence became even more visible in European arts and literature. Shakespeare drew inspiration from Persian tales. 1001 Nights, circulating throughout Europe, stirred imaginations with its magical depiction of the East. Baroque and Rococo artists were influenced not only by Persian motifs in carpets and ceramics, but by a deep artistic spirit, the pursuit of perfection in the smallest detail. Even European architecture bears traces of Persia's hand. The domes, geometric patterns, and ornate tilework seen from Spain to Italy carry echoes of Persian Islamic architecture. And should you walk through a European garden with its symmetrical paths, still reflecting pools and serene balance, you are likely stepping through a space inspired by the ancient Persian garden, designed as a mirror of paradise. More subtly still, Persian philosophy found its way into Western thought. The verses of Rumi, his reflections on love, the soul, and the unity of all creation, have quietly shaped Western hearts and minds for centuries. His poetry offered not only beauty, but a way of seeing the world, with depth, with emotion, and with reverence for the spiritual. Why then has Persia, so far removed geographically, left such a lasting imprint on Western culture? Perhaps because Persia was never merely a civilization. Persia was, and still is, the embodiment of a profound idea, that beauty, knowledge, and spirit can exist in harmony, that human experience, no matter how fleeting, can be transformed into something timeless and meaningful. This is why, despite its many falls and rebirths, Persia continues to live on in the heart and imagination of the West. It is a whisper, subtle, persistent, reminding us that some truths, some forms of beauty, transcend all boundaries of time, language, and culture. And so if one day you stand before a European painting, listen to a Western symphony, or read the works of Shakespeare, remember, somewhere deep in the tapestry of human history, Persia is still speaking. Its voice is soft but enduring, a story of eternal wisdom, beauty, and creativity that never truly ends. When we stand before the fading traces of the Silk Road, those ancient paths that once crossed high mountains, vast deserts, and endless steppes, we see more than trade routes bustling with goods. We hear, if we listen closely, the quiet whispers of history, echoes of a miraculous connection between civilizations. And in that profound web of interaction, Persia stood like a beating heart, vibrant, radiant, the living center where East and West met, where ideas and beliefs intertwined and flowed across the known world. The Silk Road was never just a route for silk, spices, and precious stones. It was an invisible network that linked people, thoughts, and cultures from distant China all the way to the Mediterranean. And Persia, positioned strategically at the crossroads of this immense network, became the luminous bridge between seemingly separate worlds. Over the centuries, merchants, scholars, missionaries, and artists from China, India, Tibet, and Central Asia passed through Persia's bustling cities, Samarkand, Bukhara, Tabriz. These cities were not merely trade hubs, they were cultural melting pots where every traveler brought something from their homeland and received in return a touch of Persian thought and spirit. Through this magnificent exchange, Persia became both inspiration and sanctuary, a crucible where the deepest ideas of humanity converged. Religion perhaps offers the clearest testimony to this convergence. As early as the first centuries CE, Buddhist monks from India passed through Persia on their way to spread Buddhism into China. Along that journey, however, it was Persia that left lasting impressions. The earliest depictions of the Buddha, once represented only through symbols like the wheel or the Bodhi tree, began to take human form, bearing facial features and garments clearly influenced by Persian artistic traditions. Even temple architecture across Central and East Asia began to reflect Persian aesthetics, with curved domes and intricate motifs breathing new life into sacred spaces. And it wasn't just Buddhism. Persia was fertile ground for many major religious traditions, Manichaeism, Zoroastrianism, and later Islam, all of which traveled eastward, often reshaping the spiritual landscapes of entire regions. Manichaeism, though born in Persia, found its greatest momentum in China. Zoroastrianism, the ancient native religion of Persia, left its mark on Eastern philosophies, its dualistic worldview influencing Taoist and early Chinese notions of cosmic balance between light and darkness, good and evil. But perhaps what is most remarkable is how Persia became not just a crossroads, but a culture of harmonization. The Persians never forced their identity on others. Instead, they absorbed, reimagined, and refined what they encountered, creating something uniquely Persian, yet universally resonant. This cultural flexibility became one of Persia's greatest strengths, a source of power that was both gentle and enduring. Persian craftsmanship, ceramics glazed in luminous blues, silk weaving techniques, and the artistry of carpet making traveled far and wide, merging into the cultural fabric of China, Korea, and Japan. Geometric patterns and elegant symmetry from Persian Islamic art inspired Eastern artisans who adapted them into regional styles while preserving their spiritual essence. Persia, in this sense, was never merely a conduit. It was a place where creativity found new ways to survive, to flourish, and to radiate outward. Yet perhaps the most profound gift of this exchange was the idea itself that civilizations are never meant to exist in isolation. Persia never stood apart from the world. Its greatest legacy may be its unshakable openness, its ability to welcome, to learn, and to recreate the foreign into something profoundly its own. That is a lesson still relevant today. A reminder that true greatness lies not in walls, but in bridges. And so when we walk today along the remnants of the Silk Road, we don't just see what has passed. We hear Persia's quiet whisper, a reminder that our world is not made of scattered pieces, but of a single, continuous flow of connection, blending, and ever-renewing creativity. This is why, despite the rise and fall of empires, Persia endures, not merely as a land or a former empire, but as an idea. An eternal symbol of humanity's ability to connect, to adapt, to imagine. A spirit that transcends time, space, and all the boundaries we once believed could never be crossed. As the sun slowly sets behind the turquoise domes of Isfahan's majestic mosques, and the call to prayer echoes through the ancient alleyways, there is something curious in the air, mysterious, familiar, and quietly powerful. It is the subtle, enduring soul of Persia, an ancient spirit long silent yet ever present, that has woven itself seamlessly into the flowing fabric of Islam, especially within Shia Islam. This union, so delicate and profound, has become one of the most remarkable testaments to Persia's continued existence, even as its outward form and name have changed completely. But why did Iran, once the heart of one of the most magnificent ancient civilizations, choose Shia Islam, a minority branch within the vast Islamic world, as the foundation for its spiritual and national identity? To answer that, we must journey back to the 16th century, to the rise of the Safavid dynasty, a powerful and ambitious Persian regime that made the strategic decision to adopt Shia Islam as the official religion of Iran. Yet this was more than a political or religious choice. It was a symbolic act, a declaration that, in a Sunni-dominated Islamic world led by Arabs and Ottomans, Iran would remain different. It would retain its unique identity and preserve its cultural soul. Shia Islam, with its profound reverence for the Imams, the spiritual successors of the Prophet Muhammad, became a natural vessel for Persian introspection, mysticism, and a deep yearning for justice. Shia Islam is not only a religion, it is a philosophy rooted in sacrifice, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of justice. These are values that resonate powerfully with ancient Persian traditions dating back to Zoroastrianism. The remembrance ceremonies of Imam Hussein, grandson of the Prophet and martyr of Karbala, exemplify this fusion between Persian cultural expressions of mourning, heroism, and spiritual resistance. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of Persia's relationship with Shia Islam is how Iran did not merely adopt it, it reshaped it. Shia Islam in Iran became inseparable from Persian identity. Step into any Shia shrine or mosque in Iran, and you'll find unmistakable echoes of classical Persian aesthetics, soaring domes, intricate geometric patterns, flowing calligraphy. These are not just religious symbols, they are visual poems, declarations of a civilization that never truly vanished, merely transformed. Even the literature and theology of Iranian Shia thought are infused with Persian spirit. From the 16th century to the present day, Persian poets and philosophers have used their native poetic language to explore the deepest ideas of Shia theology. In the verses of Hafez, Sa'adi, and Rumi, we see this synthesis at work, the sacred intertwined with the philosophical, devotion blended with meditation on love, existence, and the human soul. These timeless themes, expressed in the language of beauty, are the very heartbeat of Persian culture. Even in the everyday practice of Shia Islam in Iran, one finds the unmistakable influence of ancient Persian traditions. Reverence for the Imams reflects an older cultural pattern, honoring spiritual leaders as guardians of the people's conscience, as guiding lights in times of darkness. The Iranian commemoration of Imam Hussein mirrors the old Persian custom of remembering fallen heroes, those who died for justice and truth. So how does Persia continue to live within this new form, Shia Islam? Perhaps because Persia never sought to preserve itself in rigid form. Its genius lies in transformation, in adapting, absorbing, and silently rebirthing itself in every new era. Persia does not merely live in palaces or empires, it lives in the way Iranians think, speak, pray, and express their deepest emotions. Today, when you walk into a mosque in Iran or listen to a sermon or a spiritual poem, know that behind each word, each rhythm, echoes a voice from ancient Persia, a voice whispering softly that Persia never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, expression, and rhythm. Its essence, its soul, flows still like a quiet, eternal river beneath the surface of modern Iran. And perhaps that is Persia's greatest miracle, that a truly great civilization does not need to survive under one name or shape. It survives through its ability to change, to merge, to continue, forever part of the great river of human history that never ceases to flow. As you walk along the bustling streets of Tehran beneath the shade of old sycamore trees, or stand in quiet reflection at the radiant Azadi Square, you can feel something stirring, a modern Iran, alive and evolving by the second, seamlessly blending the challenges of a changing world with a past so vast, so glorious, it never truly faded. But how is it that ancient Persia could live again, this time under a new name? Iran? The answer lies in the turbulent yet hopeful chapters of the 19th and 20th centuries, eras shaped by the Qajar and later the Pahlavi dynasties. These two pivotal periods mark the transformation of ancient Persia into a modern nation with a redefined identity, yet one that held on more deeply than ever to its cultural soul. The Qajar dynasty, 1789 to 1925, a much debated era, is remembered as a time of decline and fragmentation. Once the heart of global power and culture, Persia found itself weakened, pressured by Western imperial forces, riddled with internal conflict, and burdened by debt and political instability. Yet paradoxically, this era also planted the first seeds of a modern national consciousness. Faced with mounting foreign interference, Persians began to see more clearly the value of independence, of national identity, and of self-determination. The 1906 Constitutional Revolution, one of the earliest democratic movements in the Middle East, was more than a political uprising. It was a bold statement of who the Persian people were becoming, modern in ambition, yet deeply rooted in tradition. The Qajar period, though seen by some as politically weak, laid the intellectual and emotional foundation for a people learning to reclaim their story, asking, perhaps for the first time in centuries, who are we, and what future do we want for ourselves? Then came the Pahlavi dynasty, beginning in 1925, like a sweeping wind across a weary, war-torn Persia. Reza Shah Pahlavi, its founder, understood that if Persia were to survive the modern era, it needed more than military or political reform. It needed to redefine itself entirely, socially, culturally, spiritually. In 1935, Reza Shah made a powerful decision. He formally changed the country's name from Persia to Iran, meaning land of the Aryans. On the surface, this seemed a simple act, but symbolically it was a declaration of rebirth, a signal that an ancient civilization had returned, reimagined for the modern world. Persia had become Iran, still the same soul, now wearing a name better suited to a future filled with both promise and peril. Under the Pahlavi dynasty, especially during the reign of Muhammad Reza Shah, Iran underwent sweeping modernization. Education, infrastructure, and the economy were overhauled. Tehran rose as a modern capital with wide boulevards, soaring towers, and cutting-edge institutions. And yet, beneath this new urban skin, Persia still pulsed, quietly, proudly. Persian culture never left. It lived in every alley, every home, every line of poetry. The great poets, Hafez, Saadi, Ferdowsi, remained spiritual guides, reminding Iranians of their timeless roots. Even modern architecture in Iran echoed Persian heritage. Domes, calligraphy, geometric patterns whispered that no matter how modern Iran became, it would never lose the voice of Persia within. So what made it possible for Persia to rise again in the 20th century, now under the name Iran? Perhaps because the soul of Persia had never truly disappeared. It lived quietly in the hearts of its people, in poems and stories, in art and memory. It adapted, evolved, survived. And today, when we look at Iran, complex, conflicted, vibrant, we see more than a modern state. We see a civilization that has survived thousands of years through triumph and tragedy, a culture that knows how to rise again and again. Perhaps that is why Persia never truly died. It simply became Iran, a new form, carrying the same fierce, enduring spirit it always had. And every time we walk the streets of Tehran, hear the music in the air, or gaze upon the domes that glitter beneath the sun, we don't just see a country, we see ancient Persia, living once again more vibrant than ever. Standing amidst the surging crowds in Tehran in February 1979, beneath fluttering flags and faces etched with emotion, one could feel with piercing clarity that Iran was once again standing at a historic crossroads. The Islamic Revolution, a seismic event that would reshape not only the fate of a nation, but the very identity of the Persian people, thrust Iran into a paradoxical journey, a path woven from threads of ancient tradition and the urgent demands of the modern age. But how did Persian identity transform in the wake of this revolution? To understand this, we must look deeper into the revolution's core. The Islamic Revolution was not simply a political uprising to dismantle the Pahlavi monarchy and install an Islamic state. It was also a radical redefinition of Iran's national character, a collective attempt to reclaim cultural and religious values many felt had been lost amid the rapid and at times disorienting modernization of the previous decades. What's fascinating, perhaps even ironic, is how this revolution placed Persian identity into a new, complex duality. On one hand, the newly formed Islamic Republic aimed to restore the foundational tenets of Shia Islam, placing religion at the heart of the national identity. On the other hand, the ancient values of Persia, its poetry, its art, its music, and its deep cultural heritage, never disappeared. They continued to live, quietly but powerfully, just beneath the surface of daily life. The revolution was, in part, a strong reaction against the West, especially against the perceived cultural imposition many Iranians believed was eroding their national soul. But in resisting that Western influence, Persian identity found a strange and subtle opportunity to reassert itself. Classical Persian poetry, from Rumi to Hafez, became for many a quiet symbol of spiritual resistance and longing for inner freedom, offering a countercurrent of beauty, introspection, and timeless wisdom. In this way, the Islamic Revolution placed Iran in a curious in-between state, a country existing between two worlds. One world shaped by strict religious law, where the state sought to regulate all aspects of life, and another world, quieter, more intimate, but perhaps more enduring, where the people held on to their Persian heritage, a culture defined by depth, artistry, and the pursuit of meaning. Each year, during the celebration of Nowruz, the ancient Persian New Year, millions of Iranians still gather in quiet joy and pride, despite official ambivalence toward its pre-Islamic origins. Young people raised in a tightly controlled religious society still turn to music, poetry, and classical Persian literature to seek meaning, identity, and a connection to something larger than the present moment. After the revolution, Persian identity became something even more layered and complex. No longer singular or monolithic, it became fluid, a living negotiation between tradition and modernity, between inner freedom and outer restriction. It became a dialogue between the timeless and the contemporary, the sacred and the poetic. And this duality, this constant push and pull, is what gives Iran its extraordinary cultural richness today. Modern Iranians live with this paradox daily. They are citizens of a strict Islamic republic, but also the heirs to an ancient Persian civilization built on freedom of thought, creative expression, and philosophical depth. Perhaps it is within this tension that they find what it truly means to be Iranian in the 21st century. Could it be that this very contradiction is what keeps Persian identity alive, constantly evolving, constantly being reborn? Persia, it seems, never truly dies. It merely adapts. It hides when it must, re-emerges when it can, and continues to flow quietly beneath the surface of Iranian life, like an underground river, always seeking light. And so, when we look at Iran today, fraught with contradictions, yet brimming with energy and hope, we see not only a modern nation, but a great civilization still finding its way forward. We see a culture that has endured millennia and continues to reimagine itself with every challenge. Persia never vanished. It simply became Iran, a new name, a new form, but the same resilient, soulful identity, alive in every breath, every verse, every song. Perhaps this is the true miracle of Persian identity, that it can endure and even thrive within the deepest contradictions. It is living proof of a civilization's power to adapt, to transform, and to persist. And today, when we look at Iran post-revolution, we do not see a nation torn between past and present. We see a people still seeking, still shaping, still reclaiming their most profound identity. An identity that has never died, one that lives on like an eternal river, always finding a path, always blending into something new so it may endure forever. As we turn the pages of modern Iranian literature, we are often struck by a quiet, familiar presence, something profound weaving its way through the lines, whispering softly behind seemingly contemporary narratives. It is the spirit of Persia, not merely the Persia of historical record, but the Persia of memory and soul. A Persia that breathes within the present moment, yet stands as an eternal symbol of a past that never truly faded. Writers like Azar Nafisi, Mahmud Dawlatabadi, and Shahanush Pasipur do not merely chronicle the political and social upheavals of modern Iran. In their works, whether by intention or instinct, there is always the quiet presence of Persia, a subtle, enduring current beneath the surface. Sometimes it appears in the form of lyrical memories, old myths nestled within everyday life. Sometimes it emerges through cultural symbols, ancient poetry, or folk tales, woven so seamlessly they feel like breath itself, touching the reader with haunting intimacy. Azar Nafisi, author of Reading Lolita in Tehran, perhaps best exemplifies this revival of Persia through literature. For Nafisi, Persia is not a fixed place in the past. It is a way of seeing, a stance of the spirit, a belief that beauty and intellectual freedom cannot be silenced by any regime. Through her writing, we encounter Iranian women living under religious authoritarianism, yet spiritually inheriting a culture that reveres knowledge, literature, and personal dignity. In their resilience, we see the timeless soul of Persia reasserting itself, quietly but defiantly. In the work of Mahmud Dawlatabadi, particularly in his epic novel Khelidar, Persia appears raw, poetic, and visceral. He paints the land and its people with depth, hardship, and immense humanity. Persia here is both a real, rugged landscape filled with pain and poverty, and a powerful metaphor for endurance, generosity, and the irrepressible will to survive. Dawlatabadi's characters are not just struggling Iranians, they are echoes of an ancient people carrying the weight of centuries on their shoulders. And in Shahrnush Pasipa's Women Without Men, Persia becomes a cultural space where women confront and reclaim their identities in a society rife with contradiction. In her prose, Persia is not history, it is a psychic geography. It is a space of freedom, depth, and introspection, a mirror of Persian cultural memory that allows women to rediscover their spiritual autonomy. So is Persia in modern Iranian literature a reality or a symbol? Perhaps it is always both. For Iranian writers, Persia is not a relic. It is a living dimension of the present, a quiet but potent presence in the national consciousness. And at the same time, it is the symbolic embodiment of spiritual values still deeply cherished: freedom, compassion, beauty, love, and the search for meaning. That is why when reading contemporary Iranian literature, we encounter a Persia that feels both close and distant, real and mythical. It is the soil of the most tender memories, the carrier of the most essential values, and the interior landscape through which writers navigate their own contradictions. Persia is not just a place to remember, it is a place to return to rediscover, to reclaim the soul's truest voice. This may be the quiet miracle of how Persia lives on in modern Iranian writing. Despite upheaval and transformation, it endures as a powerful undercurrent in the national psyche, as a wellspring of creativity and resilience. Each novel, each poem, each story becomes a way for modern Iranians to evoke Persia, not out of nostalgia but out of a living need to affirm that the soul of Persia has never died. It simply takes new forms, ever more nuanced, ever more profound. And when we read these works, we don't just glimpse a lost empire, we encounter a Persia that still breathes, a Persia that lives in every thought, every dream, every defiant act of imagination. A Persia that never dies, always adapts, always returns, living proof of the creative, enduring spirit of a truly great civilization. When you ask any Iranian about Persia, the most striking thing you might immediately notice is the way their eyes light up, filled with pride, as if you've just mentioned something sacred, something deeply personal. In that moment, you begin to understand that Persia is not merely a chapter from ancient history, it is a living presence, a part of every Iranian heart today. Let's listen to a few brief conversations with Iranians in response to a simple yet profound question. What does Persia mean to you? Fatemeh, a 35-year-old teacher in Tehran, told me softly yet with deep conviction. Persia is how I understand myself. When I read the poems of Hafez or Ferdowsi, they don't feel like remnants of the past. On the contrary, they feel real, close, as if they're telling the story of my life and soul today. Persia is where I find pride, comfort, and strength to live in a society that still has many pressures. It's never just a memory. Ali, a 28-year-old engineer, modern, energetic, shared this. For me, Persia is the feeling I get every Nowruz. When my family gathers around the Haft-Sin table, we're not just honoring an old tradition. we're living it. Persia isn't trapped in books or museums. It's in my home, in the poems my mother reads aloud, in everything that matters most. In a crowded corner of the Tabriz Bazaar, I met Mehdi, an elderly Persian carpet seller. With a thoughtful gaze, he said, "You ask where Persia is? It's right here in these carpets. Every pattern, every thread tells a story of my homeland. To me, Persia never died. It lives on every day through my hands, through each piece I send out into the world." At a quiet cafe in Shiraz, Sarah, a young woman in her 20s, paused, then smiled gently. Persia is our spirit. It's not something you can see or touch directly. But every time I read Rumi, every time I watch the sunset over Persepolis, I feel something magical, something present, something real. Persia lives forever because it is us, Iranian people, right now. These voices reveal something quietly profound. Persia is not a faded memory, nor just a cultural symbol preserved in books or museums. Persia is a living, breathing part of the Iranian soul, woven into daily life, thought, and identity. Iranians don't remember Persia, they live with it, in poetry, in festivals, in their language rich with nuance and emotion, in art and everyday moments. They carry Persia within them, a Persia that is alive, immediate, and powerfully real. What gives Persia this enduring vitality? Perhaps it's that Persia never insisted on staying frozen in a single form. It adapts, it flows, it weaves itself into each generation, constantly renewing itself in subtle but powerful ways. It is a living idea passed down not through monuments alone, but through hearts, homes, and heritage. So is Persia real, or just a memory? The answer is it's both, and something more. It's a spiritual reality, stronger than any memory. Persia doesn't fade with time. It is reborn with every voice, every gesture, every heartbeat that carries its values forward. Beauty, depth, resilience. Look into the eyes of any Iranian, and you'll see it. Persia never truly died. It is something real, something alive, something familiar, like the steady rhythm of a heart. Persia, then, is not just history. It is a presence, eternal and unshakable, flowing through the spirit of every Iranian today. When spring arrives along the lively streets of Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, or in the quiet corners of small villages nestled beneath the Alborz mountains, there is a certain atmosphere, gentle yet profound, that fills the air. It is Nowruz, the Persian New Year, a vivid reminder that Persia does not merely survive in books or museums, but lives on in every breath and heartbeat of the Iranian people today. To Iranians, Nowruz is far more than just a traditional festival. It is the rebirth of a culture, a reaffirmation of identity, a sacred ritual that honors the values of homeland and heritage. Each year, as spring approaches, families gather around the Haft-Sin table, a beautifully arranged setting of 7 symbolic items, each representing a blessing for the new year, renewal, health, prosperity, and happiness. Picture the scene: grandmothers and mothers carefully arranging sprouts, apples, garlic, vinegar, and gold coins with elegant precision. The scent of fresh flowers mingles with gentle laughter, quiet conversation, and the recitation of verses from Hafez, Ferdowsi, or Rumi. This is not simply a moment of seasonal transition. It is a spiritual renewal, a cultural heartbeat that pulses with the life of ancient Persia in the modern world. Yet Nowruz is just one expression of Persia's enduring soul. Take Yalda, the longest night of the year. Families gather to share poems, tales, and pomegranate seeds, keeping light and hope alive even in the heart of winter. Like Nowruz, Yalda is not merely a festivity, it is a quiet resistance against forgetting, a ritual reminder that Persian identity survives through words, through story, through shared moments of beauty. And then there are other folk celebrations, Mehregan, the festival of friendship and harmony, or Turgan, the festival of water and summer rain. These are not empty rituals preserved out of habit. They are living traditions passed from generation to generation as acts of cultural love and resilience. They are the rhythmic breaths of a civilization that knows how to guard its soul, even in silence. What's perhaps most extraordinary is how even the younger generations in Iran, born into a globalized world filled with countless cultural options, continue to embrace these traditions with pride and joy. They may live modern, Western-style lives day to day. But when Nowruz arrives or Yalda falls upon the calendar, they return to family, to ritual, to something timeless. In doing so, they rediscover what it truly means to be Iranian, to be heirs of Persia, keepers of a sacred cultural flame. So how has Persia endured through thousands of years of upheaval, through empires, revolutions, and regimes? The answer is simple, yet deeply profound. Persia never truly died because it is constantly nurtured by the love, pride, and reverence of the Iranian people. It survives in the smallest gestures, a whispered New Year's wish, a softly read poem, a story told on a cold winter night. These humble acts are mighty enough to keep Persia alive, forever present, never forgotten. And today, when we witness the celebration of Nowruz, Yalda, or Mehregan, we don't just see a preserved culture, we see a living Persia, one that breathes, moves, and continues its journey in every Iranian heart. This is the Persia of the present, the Persia of the future, a civilization that always finds a way to be reborn, always finds a way to pass its most beautiful and profound values on to the next generation. Perhaps this is Persia's greatest gift to the world, its eternal presence, its ability to live and relive through every generation, every human soul, every sacred ritual. A Persia that never dies but whispers always, like a flame that never goes out, illuminating the hearts of Iranians today and for generations to come. If you ever find yourself at Persepolis at sunset, standing among the towering stone columns, watching the last light of day fall gently across ancient reliefs, you might sense something strange yet unmistakably real, like a message whispered from thousands of years ago, soft but profound, quietly reaching across time to speak to us now. Persepolis is not simply a famous archaeological site, it is a living witness to the endurance and transformation of a civilization. Though more than 2 millennia have passed, though Alexander the Great once set it ablaze in a fiery conquest, Persepolis still stands, silent, proud, resolute. It reminds us that cultural identity never truly disappears. It changes, it adapts, and it finds new ways to live in new worlds through new forms. As you walk slowly up the worn stone steps, steps once tread by envoys from across a vast empire bringing gifts to Persian kings, you cannot help but ask, what remains of Persepolis today? Is it merely ruins of a distant past, or is it perhaps something more, a quiet, powerful lesson about the permanence of identity amid the inevitability of change? The famous reliefs of the Apadana, the great royal audience hall, still bear exquisite detail. The figures of people from all corners of the Persian Empire still walk in procession across the stone, their robes, gifts, and expressions immortalized in granite. And most striking of all, they are portrayed with dignity and equality. From the very beginning, Persepolis reflected a vision of harmony in difference, a cultural value that still resonates today. Persepolis is not only the memory of Persia's golden age, it is a living symbol of how civilizations endure, through inclusion, adaptation, and an unshakable sense of self. That is why it continues to attract not only historians and archaeologists, but young Iranians in search of meaning, of identity, of roots. Standing among its giant columns and carved stones, one feels a connection, a bridge between a glorious past and a turbulent present. Persepolis is not just a place to study history, it is a mirror through which we examine ourselves. It invites questions about cultural identity, about continuity, about how we endure and evolve in a world of constant change. Perhaps the greatest lesson Persepolis offers is this: no civilization survives forever in its original form. All things must change, but core values, the deepest truths of a culture, can live on, passed from generation to generation, reshaped but not forgotten. Today, Persepolis may seem like scattered ruins across a wide plain, but every stone, every stair, every relief quietly speaks to us that the identity of a people does not die. It survives, silently, resiliently, awaiting rediscovery, ready to be reborn in new forms, fit for a new age. And perhaps as we walk away from Persepolis with thoughts wandering between past and future, we will realize that Persepolis is not simply a place frozen in time. It is a living message reminding us that we are now the storytellers of Persia, that the story of Persia never truly ended. We are writing it still. So as the sun sets and shadows fall across the ancient stones, remember, identity and change are never separate. They walk side by side. That is how Persepolis has endured, not as a ruin, but as a quiet, eternal reminder that no matter how the world changes, the most beautiful, profound values of Persia live on, always ready to be reborn, always waiting to be passed on to those who come next. When we ask ourselves why, after centuries of upheaval, Persia has never truly died, we begin to uncover a profound truth. Persia is not merely a land, a kingdom, or a dynasty. Persia is an idea, a living, breathing philosophy that transcends geography, time, and even the physical existence of the people who once called it home. The true essence of Persia, what allows it to endure, is not found in the grandeur of its palaces or the glories of its imperial conquests. It resides deeper in the quiet power of its culture, in the wisdom of its philosophy, in the questions it dares to ask about life and meaning. It lives in the values passed down through poetry, through stories, through the way Persians have always understood the world. From the time of Cyrus the Great, Persians recognized that true power does not lie in domination, but in the ability to embrace difference. Tolerance, inclusivity, and cultural integration were not just ideals, they were practiced realities. Persia did not demand assimilation, it encouraged preservation, enrichment, and harmony. This foundational openness gave rise to a vibrant, diverse civilization that has long inspired the world. Persia also endures because it never stopped contemplating the deepest truths of existence. Through the voices of poets and philosophers, Rumi, Ferdowsi, Hafez, Omar Khayyam, Persian thought explored love, mortality, justice, and transcendence. Their verses are not relics, they are living rivers of meaning, as relevant today as they were centuries ago. Rumi's message of divine love and unity still pulses with energy. Omar Khayyam's haunting reflections on the fragility of life still prompt us to pause, to think, to feel. These thinkers ensured that Persia would never be frozen in time. They made it a living current of philosophy, reaching into the soul of anyone willing to listen. Perhaps Persia has lived on because it never resisted transformation. It adapts, it evolves, It weaves the old into the new. When Islam came to Iran, Persia infused its spiritual heritage into the new faith, giving rise to a uniquely Persian interpretation of Islam, full of humanism, mysticism, and introspection. When faced with Western pressure, Persia responded not by erasing itself, but by learning, adapting, and deepening its identity. But more than anything, Persia lives because its people remember. Generation after generation, Iranians have passed on the spirit of their civilization, not just through monuments, but through Nowruz gatherings, Yalda stories, lullabies, poems, and everyday rituals that carry the wisdom of the past into the soul of the present. And perhaps the deepest reason Persia never dies is because it continues to move the hearts of everyone it touches. Anyone who reads Persian poetry, walks the paths of Persepolis, or listens to the soul of Persian music knows something powerful, something real is there. It transcends borders and languages. It reaches into something universal. So when we wonder if Persia still exists, we begin to understand. Persia was never only a country. It is a state of being, a vision of life rooted in beauty, harmony, wisdom, and the freedom to seek deeper truths. It is the ultimate proof that a truly great civilization lives not through conquest or permanence, but through its ability to inspire, to reflect, to regenerate. This is why Persia has never died. It lives not only in ruins or relics, but in every heart that remembers, every voice that carries its values forward, every mind that dares to dream in its language. And so, whenever we ask whether Persia will live forever, the answer is found in how we think of it, how we feel it. Persia will always exist so long as there are hearts that love it, voices that preserve it, and souls that carry forward the eternal, unyielding essence of a civilization that refuses to be forgotten. As we look back on the journey of a great civilization like Persia spanning thousands of years, we begin to understand why Persia has never truly died. But deeper than the palaces, deeper than the eternal poetry or profound philosophy, lies its greatest secret, a quiet truth resting at the very point where ancient Persia and modern Iran converge. Persia and Iran, two names, two seemingly separate eras, yet in truth a single living entity, forever entwined, flowing as one enduring current beneath the ever-shifting tides of history. Persia never ceased to exist because it always knew how to return, how to adapt, how to reshape itself for every new age. As modern Iran emerged through revolution, reform, war, and dreams of peace, Persia remained, not as a distant memory, but as something deeply alive in the heart of every Iranian today. It exists not in the past, but in the present and future, in the way Iranians live, speak, create, love, and hope. Perhaps the most extraordinary truth is this: Persia is not history, it is now. It is the poem read aloud at dusk, the festival celebrated around the Haft-Sin table, the music playing in the background of everyday life, the language spoken between generations. And now I offer a question, not grand, but intimate. A question for you, the one who has traveled this path with me. Have you realized that Persia is still alive? Have you sensed that Persia does not just live in textbooks, museums, or ruins, but in thoughts, in hearts, in the quiet choices and daily rituals of real people? And perhaps, even further, Persia lives not only in the hearts of Iranians, but in the heart of anyone who has been touched by its beauty. Each time you read a verse by Rumi or Hafez, each time you admire a Persian carpet, listen to its haunting melodies, or taste its rich cuisine, You are engaging with living Persia. Not the Persia of the past, but Persia as it is, here, now, and reaching toward tomorrow. Persia is an eternal idea, a state of spirit that is open, adaptive, resilient. A profound lesson in how to endure, how to survive, not through domination, but through grace, nuance, and the quiet strength of meaning. So now allow yourself a moment of stillness. Ask yourself, do you believe Persia lives within you? Do you understand that any civilization, no matter how shaken by time, can live on through the spiritual values it passes forward? And let that question guide you in your own reflection, in your own journey. Perhaps in one very quiet, personal moment, you'll realize you're not just aware of Persia, you are part of it, just as every Iranian who breathes its poetry and celebrates its rituals is part of it today. In the end, Persia is not merely an empire or a place on a map. It is a story, a living narrative of how a civilization can live forever in the heart of humanity, in every thought, every breath, every hidden dream. And maybe that is Persia's most beautiful and enduring secret, the one I've hoped to share with you. Persia has never died. Persia always lives. The only question that remains now is, have you noticed? Hold that question close. And who knows, maybe you too are now a small but essential part of Persia's eternal journey. A journey that, in its own quiet way, always finds a way to live on in each person, each heart, each new generation to come.